Welcome to Miss Martin Muses. Welcome to Miss Martin Muses, where we muse upon what makes me laugh, makes me cry, makes me happy, makes me sad, or just really ticks me off. Well, tonight we are talking about something that makes me laugh, it makes me cry, it makes me happy, and it makes me sad. It does not really tick me off. It is the Chronicles of Narnia here at the Fantasy Tavern, or the debut of the Fantasy Tavern. And I have with me the one, the only Lady Gravemaster.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Miss Martin. How are you this evening?
Hey, I'm doing great. And our third half, or our third.
I like it. Third half. We'll roll with it. It's good.
Yeah, well, our third half. Okay, that just sounds really off with the math. It's a new math. He might be showing up. But I give no judgment when somebody is sleeping and it's the middle of the night in their country. So Stig might be showing up and he might not. We will just see. But hello. Thank you, OG Star Wars Laura. Thank you for being here. And she says hello, everyone, as you come in, slash that like button. Thank you. Gadfly Fiction says, got my cup of tea. Yay. Finished writing a chunk of my thesis. Oh my gosh. With about a minute to spare. Well done. And he gives us a salve. And I'm assuming it's salve because I like to do ecclesiastical Latin. If you are a classical Latinist, oh, that's okay. It's a free country. Or at least it will be for a little bit of time. And thank you for everyone coming in and everyone that will be watching this on the replay. When we were deciding to get something together, we wanted to start with something that we all knew and maybe hasn't been discussed too much lately. And of course, it is the Chronicles of Narnia, the series by C.S. Lewis. And about 20 years ago, we had a very good adaptation, especially of the first one, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. C.S. Lewis is a little bit different in his writing approach than J.R.R. Tolkien. They were companions, friends, kind of cut from the same cloth, but Tolkien was not a big fan of allegory. And you can read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and all of his books, and it is a one-to-one allegory.
It's
there is no doubt exactly what he is doing. He is telling the story of Christianity with Narnia, the salvation history with all of that with Aslan. There is a direct correlation to salvation history.
I mean, it's two sons of Adam and two daughters of Eve. If that isn't a clue, that's not even a clue. He's like shouting it at you. And if you don't pick it up from there, you're not going to pick it up anywhere. And I apologize if there's background noise coming from me. The little Gravemasters are out and about running around and having fun. Since it's still kind of early here. Yeah. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say no problem at all. You know, I like children. I like children. Gadfly Fiction says fivefold exegesis in fantasy fiction form. What he said.
I'd say that's fair. I don't think here's the thing. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, even though Game of Thrones is not finished, and in my personal opinion, though I've not read the books, is nowhere near on par with C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, but especially his Space Trilogy, which I recommend everybody check out. It's literally just called C.S. Lewis, the Space Trilogy. But Tolkien, this is Narnia and the Space Trilogy and C.S. Lewis and his journey later in life. It's really owed to J.R.R. Tolkien. Just like there would be no Game of Thrones without Lord of the Rings, there would be no C.S. Lewis without J.R.R. He brought C.S. Lewis into the folds of Christianity and, of course, hoped for him to become a Catholic, but to my knowledge, unless it was on his deathbed and he didn't tell anyone, he never converted to Catholicism.
Go
ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, no, he did not. And it was a disappointment to Tolkien. And
yes,
it's hard for many people to understand, to try to guess why he did not. Long story short, I think it had a lot to do with the time in which C.S. Lewis lived, because he definitely had beliefs that people would consider Catholic, but he lived in the 50s and the 60s, and he also was raised in Northern Ireland with some of those prejudices, and they're very hard to overcome, though most of his students and his contemporaries did eventually enter the Catholic Church. So.
Yes, and so that's when he came to Christianity, because you have... So here is the thing. You've got lots of stories with Christian influences and Christian one-to-one allegory. I don't think I'm stepping out of bounds when I say that now the title has left me. Not Wish. A Wrinkle in Time. There we go. A Wrinkle in Time is a pretty solid allegory for Christianity as well. I mean, there's literally there's Christianity woven throughout the books, literally. So you have a lot of these influences throughout the years, but it's particularly interesting for when you read C.S. Lewis's works, because you actually get Christmas and Easter in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because you've got, the breaking of the stone table, and then, of course, because Aslan has... Spoilers, I guess? Sorry. Because Aslan has sacrificed himself for somebody else. He's like, there's magic that even the witch doesn't know. So you get Easter, where he breaks the stone table and shatters the new magic, and is resurrected to save the day. And he's more powerful than he was before, and he brings about the downfall of the Snow Queen, or the White Witch.
Yes.
And so you get that aspect of it, but also the theme throughout the book is always winter, never Christmas. And you get to meet Father Christmas in the story, and it's very enchanting, and it's quite beautiful. So there's Christianity all throughout, particularly heavily in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it does such a good job of telling the story. It really does. It's a great way to tell the story. And with C.S. Lewis, the reason that he was so passionate about it, and I think part of the reason why Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is so good, arguably the best in the Chronicles of Narnia, I think the reason it is so good is because it does tell that story, and it meant so much to C.S. Lewis, because he knew what it was like to live without Christianity, without that belief, and to not have anything higher than himself. He knew what he was missing, and he kind of wanted to show that sort of on paper in his books, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. You see that with the magical reaction of the children as they discover there's this world out there, and the wonder of it all. It's also such a great way to show the story to children, because this, unlike the Lord of the Rings, this really was explicitly written for children, though we as adults can enjoy it very much. And I'm glad that you mentioned the part about Santa Claus, Father Christmas. Oh my gosh. And there were so many iconic things that as a little girl stuck with me that I just loved. Was Mr. Tumnus and the light pole.
Yeah. Mr. Tumnus. Yes. Shouldn't we be headed that way towards the lamppost? Excuse my terrible British accent. I'm not British.
Yeah.
But yes, I think, and also it really speaks to, and I mean, much like J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis wrote very intentionally. And so Edmund, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miss Martin, but Edmund is supposed to represent Judas.
Yes.
And unlike Judas, however, obviously Edmund gets a second chance.
Yes. He's what would happen if Judas had repented.
Yes. Yes. As he should have, but you know what? Hindsight's 20/20, and that's just not what happened.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and there are also many other things that I think maybe people don't always get with the names of the children. For example, you have Lucy, which is a name that's derived from the Latin, which is like light, like guide, enlightenment, and that she's the one who's probably the strongest believer, and she guides the rest of them. Peter, the leader, the way he's the leader of the apostles and the Pope, if you will.
Yes.
Of it all. And even at the very end, way at the very end, when they all go to the final Narnia, he's the one who kind of closes the gates, kind of guards it. The whole little myth about St. Peter being the one at the pearly gates. Just loads of things like that that are really cool.
Yep.
But didn't you get the living daylights scared out of you by the witch? Oh my gosh, she scared me to death.
Here's the thing. Like the first time I watched the animated Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe way back when I was itty bitty. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what this is about, because I was not quite, I think I was in like second or third grade, so not quite to the age, because I didn't read Lord of the Rings until I was in fifth grade, so I wasn't quite there to be reading about this stuff. But my mom, she was like, you're gonna absolutely love this story, and I was like, okay. And so we sat down and we watched it. And I was like, all right. And then the White Witch came down, and I was like, doesn't he know you're not supposed to talk to strangers? Like, that was the first thing that came out of my mind. And secondly, like, if someone came up on me and it wasn't Santa Claus, like, in a sleigh, I'd be like, okay, thank you very much. Have a nice day. I am not here for this at all. Like, her smile, like everything about her, even when she was being quote unquote kind, everything about her was just false, and like it radiated pure evil.
Yes. Well, and she also gave him candy. You're always told, don't take candy from a stranger. And she did the whole Turkish delight.
Yes. He went full bore. He went Turkish delight, hot chocolate, flipping, and like, because the first thing, like, and that's the other thing that gets thrown in his face is, just like Judas with the 20 pieces of with the silver, it's like, you sold out your siblings for Turkish delights.
Yes.
Like, ooh. And not just like, to be fair, he didn't even sell out his siblings. He sold out Mr. Tumnus. Like, was just straight up a chatty Cathy. And I'm like, you don't know this woman at all. You've broken like 4 of the cardinal rules when it comes to strangers. What is your deal, my dude? Like, why are you the way you are, Edmund? Like, I get it. He was cold, and part of him was probably jealous because it, like, I don't, like, you see that too. He gets jealous of Lucy because she found it and he didn't. And like, I think, I don't know. There's this whole, he's like irritated almost to the point with Lucy and jealous that so many people adore her. And then of course he doesn't like Peter because Peter gets everything. Peter's always responsible, has a good head on his shoulders. Always does what appears to be the right thing to Edmund. Like, Peter never missteps.
Yeah.
And then you have Susan, who tries to very much be like the peacemaker between Peter and Edmund.
Yeah.
And then of course, she's trying to like make Lucy grow up. And I think part of it is because Susan has forgotten what it's like to be a little girl with belief and hope. Because again, like you said, like, she's almost like a doubting Thomas. She's like, okay, Lucy, like, she's just sort of she's just trying to like be kind. She doesn't actually believe Lucy. And she's trying to get Lucy, she'll be like, Lucy, you need to grow up.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, she's telling the truth. But because she's a child, you guys are sort of just disregarding whatever it is she says as a lie or a made up story or something like that.
Well, and Susan is put in the unenviable position of mother as a child because these children were sent away. Both their fathers off fighting the war and their mother sent them out to the country. So Susan has this older sister syndrome where she feels like, well, I've got to be the mother, in mother's place. And she's trying to play that role.
Yes.
When she herself is just a child.
Yep. And she go ahead.
I was going to say Soul Assassin. He says, I'll sell my siblings for a Klondike bar. Well, there you have it. You've heard it here first on Miss Martin Muses. That's the price.
There you go. What would you do for a Klondike bar? I'd sell out my siblings. No, there were times when I wasn't a fan of my siblings, believe me. But that's just part of having siblings. You are forced to live with them. Yeah. And you want to be your own person, but it gets really irritating because you realize that you are very, very similar in likes and dislikes and attitude and all this. And so you just desperate to be your own person. So you just try to avoid each other or you get into fights. And then one day you wake up and you're like, yeah, you're not so bad. But that's not telling you you're in your 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
Some people never outgrow it.
Yeah. And because Edmund was so jealous, especially his older brother and all that made him susceptible to the temptation that the White Witch was offering him.
Yes.
You will never be tempted beyond what you can gain, but if you already have let down the guard of your heart, you're going to be very open to what will be offered.
Mm-hmm.
And I must admit, especially watching it in the movie, oh my gosh, when he's eating that Turkish delight, I was like, I don't care where. I want to get some Turkish delight now. It looked so good.
It did. It really did.
And I think, and the hot chocolate, because you know how it is when you're freezing, you're cold, and then there's a cup of hot chocolate waiting for you.
Yes. So, and I think, it has a lot to do with your, with the environment that you're in as well, because it sounds ridiculous to someone right now to say that you would sell out your village for a glass of water. But if you were in the desert and you're parched of thirst, and so, I mean, again, that comes into play too. You had Edmund was freezing. He was tired. He was lost. And the White Witch appeared and offered him everything that he wanted at the time, everything that was important to him at the time. Because not everybody is strong enough. There's only so much the human body can go through, until you actually start to break. The fact that it's always intriguing to me where people are like, oh, well, if I had been alive in Christ's day and I'd been there, I would have said for them to set him free. And I was like, no, that was something my priest actually said. He was like, we as Catholics and Christians, we're called to be honest, and that includes with ourselves. And so you should know that if you were there in the crowd when Jesus was being presented by Pontius Pilate and you had to choose between him or Barabbas, you would have gone with Barabbas just like the rest of the crowd, because that it's just what it is. And you just dang, that's right. Because we have the gift of hindsight. They don't know, as far as I know, nobody possesses the gift of foresight. Yes. And so, we have that advantage behind us. Yeah. So it's very easy to sit here and be like, I would do this or I wouldn't do that. And so when you see Edmund in his position where he's already irritated with his sister, he didn't grab a coat for whatever reason. He's trouncing around in incorrect clothing for hiking in the snow-covered forested areas, and he's hungry, and boom, here's the White Witch bringing him his every immediate desire. It is not at all hard to believe that he would cave instantaneously. Yeah. Still ridiculous that he would sell out Mr. Tumnus and his siblings for some Turkish delight and hot cocoa, but it happened all the same.
Well, and it was also symbolic as well. Yes. I mean, not literally the same way the whole thing with the apple. It wasn't like you're damned forever because you took a bite of an apple. There's more to it than that. Yes. I find it interesting that Edmund's name, the name Edmund, means prosperity, riches, and also protector. which is what he becomes eventually.
Yeah, he turns into that.
Yes. So I think that C.S. Lewis kind of knew what he was doing with some of these names, and definitely, I mean, the Turkish delight was like the apple, the forbidden fruit.
Absolutely.
Some people are asking what's Turkish delight like. I guess I could say that you Google it. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But it's good. It's very, very good. Oh, we have a hot Australian in the house. It is Lethal Lightning, two of his favorite ladies. Well, thank you, Lethal. Thank you for popping in. Definitely appreciate you. Gadfly Fiction says it is also the insidiousness of not realizing he sold them out because of the witch's cunning, etc. True. Yeah, that's true. And remember, she's a grown-up, an ancient evil creature, and he's a kid. He didn't have the tools.
Yeah, like not only is she an adult, she is ancient. Like,
yes,
she is very old. That's something that really comes across in the books, and not so much like because you get the sense that Aslan is very old, and you get the sense that the witch is old, but you're not really sure how old. Like, she's very, very old, and that's why when he makes the comment that there is magic deeper still that even the witch doesn't know, that means that this is like the magic he's talking about, the stuff that started the universe, essentially.
Yes.
Like the laws of the universe, because that is how old the magic he's referring to is. And that's the only reason the White Witch doesn't know about it.
Precisely. Yes, because she doesn't know. Just if like Satan, thinks they're so cool. Oh, I know everything, and then it's like, huh? What? How'd that happen? Definitely symbolic. And if Stig were here, I think he would be able to chime in on this point, because Stig is not a believer. He's very open to that. He's an atheist, but he also enjoys it. And I think maybe that's the point to say that. As Christians, as Catholics, both you and I really see it and really do enjoy it, that level of the Narnia Chronicles. But you can still enjoy these, even knowing it's some big metaphor and allegory, and not necessarily feel like, oh, I just can't enjoy this. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I was reading something at the same time. Is that you can just take it as it is, which is a story. And I think that sometimes we, as a society, have gotten so much our heads up our butts. I'm talking more popular culture, that we feel like we have to absolutely ascribe to these beliefs before we can enjoy something, which is absurd. And there's lots of things that I don't ascribe to, but I do enjoy. I never not read Harry Potter because it had witchcraft in it, even though it was pretend witchcraft. And it's the same thing, is that stories have a power of their own. And again, while you, as Christians, you can really enjoy the Chronicles of Narnia on a whole other level.
Yes.
With the allegory, but you don't necessarily have to be a believer. Hello.
No,
Kat,
and I think that's probably
in.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I was just reading him.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think that's part of the appeal of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because even though the allegory is very one-to-one, and you can 100% see it, especially like if you're even remotely familiar with Christian beliefs, you can definitely tell, but it blends beautifully into the story so that anybody can enjoy it. It's not limited to only believers, and I think it's probably helped, just like Lord of the Rings has. I think it's helped a lot of people sort of find their way to belief and faith, and those are always beautiful things to hear. And for such powerful storytellers to, I guess, present their stories in that way really shows you like just how incredible and important the gift of storytelling is for us as humans.
Yes. Stories have a power, and C.S. Lewis wrote about that. G.K. Chesterton wrote a great essay called on fairy tales, which really talks about the power of fairy tales in that and why they are still so timeless. And of course, Tolkien. These men all influenced each other. I'm not entirely sure if Tolkien ever actually met G.K. Chesterton, but definitely G.K. Chesterton was a huge influential writer at the time. And not to forget that these men, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, were some of the most brilliant intellectual men of their time. They were medieval scholars, they were linguists, they were professors. They really knew their crap. And this idea that just because they were writing fantasy or kids fantasy, that it could be dismissed is a very short-sighted, because
I think
there's so many layers.
Yeah, was it C.S. Lewis that I want to say it was C.S. Lewis that said, if you're writing a story only for children that parents can't also enjoy, then it's not a very good story. I or something like that. I want to say that was C.S. Lewis.
It very possibly could have been,
because you can write stories that are not meant for children, but so like adult stories that children are not meant to read. Like with different themes that they should not have to read at such a young age or whatever. But when you write a child's story, it should be something that adults can also read and appreciate and like.
Yes,
if that makes sense. I'm pretty sure that was C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I think another good example of that would be some of the old classic cartoons. I can still watch an old Tom and Jerry, and you've got a little kid next to you, you're babysitting, and they're roaring laughing at one part of it, and you're roaring laughing because there's a whole other layer of humor being displayed through it. Circling back a little bit to the fact that this is a Christian allegory, absolutely, but it is fantasy. This is called the Fantasy Tavern. This is what has been written about the Chronicles of Narnia and why it's fantasy, and it hits all the criteria. Some of the criteria of fantasy are story, and common characters, the evocation of another world, the use of magic and supernatural power, a clear sense of good and evil, and quests. So that's what puts this firmly into the fantasy genre, I think, rather than pious genre. I don't think anyone considers this like you would not put this in the religion section of a kid's book section area. I think that it would go under fantasy for all of those reasons.
Yes. I know Christian bookstores do sell it because obviously it is a Christian work, but it is not by any stretch of the imagination like a theological work, like a theological study guide or anything like that.
Catechism or anything like that. And as we were saying, that someone like Stig truly does enjoy these stories without being a believer at all. And of course, we know that their story common characters. The excavation of the other world is Narnia. You can go through a wardrobe and be an entirely different other world, use of magic, supernatural power. There's definitely a clear sense of good and evil. That is always in fantasy. And I think some of these dorks who are trying to ruin fantasy are trying to make that ambiguous. It's like, no, this is part of the characteristic of it. Also, the same thing that makes fairy tales so unique. And quests. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe book it's not really a questy book, not as much as maybe the later ones like The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair. A lot of those are, those you could almost make into a video game.
The Silver Chair most definitely, I think, would probably be a better video game adaptation than a film adaptation for sure. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, honestly, like the only questing part is when they're looking for Aslan.
Yeah,
and that's kind of it. And it's not really I can't say it's not dangerous because they do have the White Witch tracking them, but like the ultimate goal is to it's not to like join the battle or to free the prince, like like the ultimate goal is literally just to get to Aslan so they can save their brother. Like that's they're not even going to Aslan to help fight the war. They're going to Aslan because they want to save their brother. Like, that's kind of really the only questing part I can recall.
Yes. Well, and how moving was this? I think the movie did this also very well, that even though their brother was a little snot and they were fighting all the time, there's a line where Lucy says, please, he's our brother. We've got to save him. We've got to save him. And yes, Soul Assassin, the lion was a stand-in for God, for Jesus, the second person of the Trinity. Yes.
Can I say?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Liam Neeson was perfect casting for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But if you need the voice of God, there you go.
Yeah. I mean,
no.
There have been some good ones. Like, I liked Morgan Freeman as God in Bruce Almighty. He did a good job too. But like, Liam Neeson as Aslan was just pure perfection of casting, for sure.
Yeah. He has that low, deep voice. The only thing that would have been better is like James Earl Jones, but then everyone would have been, it's Darth Vader.
Yeah, true. Yeah, like that would have been quite the flip-flop.
Yeah. No, he was amazing. Well, the whole part with him going to the table, it was beat for beat the Good Friday.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way.
He was like, Lucy came up on him and he was like, he was all sad. And he was like, oh, I'm just thinking, child. Like, I'm very, like, all this other stuff. And yeah, it was just.
He even had a way of the cross. And it was the women that were there comforting Jesus the same way that the two girls were the only ones there with Aslan. There were no men there. It was women. And they were the ones that discovered, of course, that he had risen just like the same way with Jesus. Soul Assassin says, God is Irish. Who knew? Soul Assassin, you didn't know God was Irish. Oh my gosh. How could you have lived this long? Obviously, you've never been to Ireland. Of course, he's Irish. And so is his mother.
So is his mother.
His mother is, yeah. So, yeah, I love it. And the movie did such a good job with the magic, just how magical it all was, and the way they did the music. The score was amazing, absolutely amazing, and it was almost sad the way at the end you see that they've grown up, they become these queens and kings of Narnia. It's so triumphant, and they follow that little stag, and next thing you know, they're back in our world and they're kids again. Like, imagine that.
Yeah. And like to have all of that, because you always get asked the question, like, if you could go back and start over at the age of like 6, but with all the knowledge you have now, like, what would you do different, or would you do it? And like, I think, them going back to their childhood forms, like, talk about a shell shock, because they were in Narnia for decades. And then to just be thrown back into a world of war like this, like they're still at war in Britain. Like they've been shipped away because of the war. There's all of these things happening, and now they've fought in wars. They've ruled together side by side, like this incredible kingdom, this nation of Narnia, the north, the south, the east, the west. And now they have to go back to just to being kids. Like, yikes.
Yeah,
I think.
And then it's also almost melancholy when they are brought back in the Prince Caspian. And they realize that everything's in ruins and that they've faded into legends.
And I think that's why Caspian is probably my favorite book out of the series, because it shows you that simply because, like, if you can have something that is pure and incredible and strong and steadfast, but if you do not maintain it, or if those that come after you are less worthy, it will fall. Like, it will collapse. And you witness that in real life, but I think Prince Caspian showed that in a manner that was easy to understand, not just as like in as a child, but for anybody. And the fact that they were able to sort of re-inspire and reignite hope in people, I think that's the part that's missing from modern cinema. Because if Prince Caspian, if Prince Caspian was made today, it would 100% be just a nihilistic horror. Like, just it like there would be no inspiration or message of hope or believing in yourself. Like, none of that would have come across if it were made today.
No.
Like, at all. It would have just been straight nihilism.
And that would, gosh, we'd have all been ready to jump off the cliff. And the adaptation of Prince Caspian has its issues for sure. I think they got that aspect of it correct about how they brought back hope. And that was a perfect segue, Lady Gravemaster, because I was going to say, and since you love Prince Caspian, yeah, what particularly makes this your favorite of the Chronicles of Narnia?
I think that it shows that no matter who you are, it's, like, I think of that quote from like, some are born great, some are, oh gosh, some
greatness is thrust upon them,
and greatness is thrust upon them, and but for me, what this story does is it shows that no matter who you are, if you truly believe in justice and hope and bringing people to an understanding that there is something greater out there, then you have the ability to change even just one heart, which I don't think people realize how hard it is to, I mean, let's be honest, like, since this is a Christian series that we're talking about, Jesus hasn't reached everybody's heart, and he's the Son of God. Like, he has not been able to, or like, he could if he took away free will, which he would never do, but Jesus has not turned every heart. And I don't think people realize how hard it is to just inspire or change just one heart or just one mind, and help them to see the greatness in themselves and in the world around them. Yes, some are born great, some become great, and some have greatness thrust upon them.
Yes.
This isn't, like, this situation isn't really any of those. It's someone who simply decided that they were no longer going to they were no longer going to go along with the nihilism, with the destitution, with the, like, this like, these people were longing for the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve, their kings and queens of old, of legend, to return. And when they did, I mean, they were, like, stunned at what they were. They were like, you weren't what we were expecting. Like, you weren't like the legends and the stories and the tales. And of course they're like, well, yeah. But, this, like, we had to leave. And then now that we're back and we see all of this, it's just so sad because it's not the Narnia that we knew. And so that's when you sort of have this wake up moment of, you can pine for the past all you want. It's not going, like, even if it comes back, as we're seeing actually with IPs today, you can pine for the past all you want. But even if it comes back to you, it's not going to be what it was when it existed. It's up to you to forge and form that which will set you up for the future, and to build off of what has existed in the past. Use it for inspiration, treat it with reverence, but realize that you have to be the one, whether you think you are worthy or not, or whether you think you're ready or not, you have to be the one to do this, because there is no one else. Because if you, there's that other, I'm in my sayings mood this evening, but
go for it.
If you, if everybody waits for somebody to do something then nobody is going to do anything.
That's right.
So, like, it's literally up to you, and all you have to do is you just have to decide that this is what you're going to do, and you have to stick to those convictions. I don't think people realize that greatness is made up of 3 very simple things: patience, humility, and consistency. Literally just stick to it.
Yes, in a way, the vernacular phrase, the God helps them that helps themselves.
Amen. Yes, leap of faith moments.
Yes, and Jake and Ironside, yeah, that's a Klingon thing too. Yes, I believe it is. Absolutely,
yes.
Well, and that's I think what makes Prince Caspian that's so much fun. But I also loved the dwarf Trump and Ripacheep. I love the animals in Prince Caspian.
Yes.
And it was so terrible how they were all so mean to all the little animals and all that. So I really enjoyed it and how they helped fight and then at the very end when the dwarf had his moment of belief when he saw Aslan. So
yes, and awesome. That's the other thing too, and that's why. So as the books go on, there's less and less. You get Peter and Susan and Edmund and Lucy all sort of fade out, and at the very end, you're left with their cousin.
Yeah,
and they tried in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. They really did, where you have Edmund, Lucy, and the cousin. But like as the time goes on, as the story goes on, Peter and Susan and Edmund and even Lucy, like they all sort of stop believing. Like that's the best. Yeah. Like they've sort of outgrown the ideas and ideals of Narnia.
Yeah, almost like the Polar Express, where you can't hear the bell anymore because you no longer believe.
You can no longer hear the bell ringing, and so in Prince Caspian is the last time that we see Peter and Susan in Narnia. Mm-hmm. Peter, I think, if I remember correctly, because it's been a long time since I've read Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but I want to say that he gets conscripted and goes off to war, I believe.
Yes. He does eventually go back to Narnia, but Susan does not, and that's a whole
Susan does not. But Peter, well, and the thing too is, I think the reason Peter does and Susan doesn't is because Peter goes to war, and kind of so much like how war shaped Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's life and own experiences and everything like that. Mm-hmm. The Peter has sort of gone back to the idea of humility, especially like faith, like having faith in the battlefield, and it was like he goes through all of these other trials, and I think that's why he's actually able to go back to Narnia. That's just a me theory. Yeah. I don't know if that's what Lewis was going for, but it would make sense because Susan didn't even serve as a nurse.
Yeah, well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, which is surprising for someone who took on the role of mother for them.
Yeah. Well, it was discussed that C.S. Lewis, when talking about Susan and what made her different from the other ones, is that Susan was always so wrapped up in being a grown-up and in wanting to be something that she was not, such that she kind of lost her faith, for lack of a better word, though that's not quite the right word, that she couldn't believe because she was too wrapped up in wanting to grow up.
And trying to make them, like I said, she was the one who was pushing Lucy to grow up too.
Yeah, and she was also caught up in some worldly things too. She thought that it was through worldly things that she could get better, or things could get better, and she got a little bit wrapped up in herself on that. And sometimes people give C.S. Lewis an unfair criticism where he implies that she actually is damned because of it, but he never said that. She just didn't get to go to Narnia with the final Narnia with the rest of everybody. But he said she still has plenty of time. He's like, no, I wasn't damning her to hell or anything.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so that was what he had said. She lost that childlike faith that was needed, and the heroism.
Because at one point, like, she doesn't even really have the faith of a mustard seed at that point, because she's very concerned with how the world views her.
Precisely, that's well worded. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and it's very sad to see, like, when you read about it in the books. And so in the film Prince Caspian, they age Prince Caspian up, and they make this sort of romance almost, or like unrequited love, or star-crossed lovers, whatever you want to call it, with Caspian and Susan. And while I didn't really appreciate, because like it took away a lot from why Prince Caspian was so hopeful, because he was still that child, he still had that hope. But I think on the flip side, what it did do was show how concerned Susan was with doing what she thought was appropriate and proper for a lady to, like, an esteemed lady to do, which is find a suitable husband, someone who you can share things with, and all of the other stuff as you grow older and grow up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so,
well, it says in the book that she got obsessed with nylons, lipstick, and invitations, the things of the world.
I do remember the lipstick part, because she tried to get Lucy to wear it, and Lucy said no.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of sad, because you don't really know if Susan ever came back around in the books. And then I guess there's I don't, yeah, like I said, Prince Caspian does a really good job of showing what happens when you don't maintain the same respect and reverence and diligence when you trade when new rulers come to take over, whether that be through war, through birth, marriage, over, like, usurping a throne, whatever it may be. If whoever it is that is in charge of preserving and conserving your legacy and the throne and the people, if they are more concerned about themselves, or kind of like with Susan, the worldly things, you're going to fall into ruin. And then it's kind of like the torch really does have to get passed from generation to generation, and when it doesn't is when you start to decay.
Yeah. No,
but you can always reignite. Yeah, you can always reignite that torch, which is the lesson from Prince Caspian. But that is not what would come across if it was made today. They would just stick with the nihilism part and be like, too bad, so sad, time to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking up a quote here. I'll find it maybe later, but no, absolutely, that is correct. And the challenge chat says, Lady Toriel, oh, we have an elf in the house. They had changed so much as you get older. Yes, as you get older, and talking about high society. Oh yeah, and that they tried to make Susan into an elf. Bowman from Lord of the
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of hurt a little bit. Well, I think that in the movie Prince Caspian, on that note, it was a little bit indulgent on the part of the writer and the director. I feel like he's like, I really did a good, successful job with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I'm going to play a little bit in the sandbox and do exactly what I wanted, especially with those over long and over elaborate battles that he does.
Yeah, that was unnecessary, to say the least.
Yeah. So it was just him being indulgent, and yeah. I'm never gonna find this quote. What he says is, C.S. Lewis says, The books don't tell us what happened to Susan. She is left alive in this world at the end, having been turned into a rather silly, conceited young woman, but there is plenty of time for her to mend. And perhaps she will get to Aslan's country in the end, in her own way. I think that whatever she had seen in Narnia, she could probably persuade herself as she grew up that it was all nonsense, and that maybe that someone said then she could continue writing her story about how she goes through that portion of her life. And he said, I could not write that story myself, not that I have no hope of Susan's ever getting to Aslan, but because I have a feeling that the story of her journey would be longer and more like a grown-up novel, and I don't want to write that. So there you are. So that's what he says. I think that you spelled it wrong. Yeah, but I thought it was very ill-conceived to try to make Susan not just that, but try to make there be a romance. That was just stupid. Talk about something that was not the novel that C.S. Lewis himself was wanting to write. We can perhaps go through all of the novels, but I'm not too crazy about them. I think that Eustace, I think that he was a very interesting character, and I think that the actor they got to play him in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I think that he did a very good job, a very talented actor. But if there are two more books that I really do enjoy on their own merit and almost as standalone stories, is The Horse and His Boy. I think that's a delightful little story. It's not even really connected to any of it, but it's just a really cool journey about a boy and a horse. I love that one, and I love The Magician's Nephew. I cried so hard at the end of that book, but it was a happy cry. Because you see, part of what was weighing so heavy on his heart was the professor while he's in his younger form when he first goes to Narnia. Yeah, when he's younger form. In other words, when he's a child.
Absolutely.
Is that his mother is dying, and he was just kind of pleased. He's talking to Aslan, I believe, and he's just like, can you do something for my mother and all that? And they just weren't sure. And then it turns out that this magic tree from which they end up building the wardrobe with the magic in it, as a reward, he gets to get some fruit, which will heal his mother. And they're all clapping and cheering when he was granted that gift. And I just cried and cried. All the people in Narnia were also happy for him that he knew that he was going to be able to cure his mom. And then, of course, he goes back and gives the fruit to his mom and she gets cured. That is so friggin' moving. I love that story. And because, this poor little boy, he was just so worried about his mom and that he was able to get her cured, because not everyone gets to get cured of their diseases. I think that when we all have parents or people we love that are sick, we would do anything for them, but we can't always do that.
Yeah, I think it really adds to so like, even though that this book came out much later than Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, it's technically chronologically the first book. And it just sort of adds. I would almost actually recommend reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe first, and then going and reading The Magician's Nephew. Yeah, because it really adds to his story, and sort of how, like, because when they go to him and he's like, there's many different paths to Narnia, and you're like, how do you know this? Like, what's going on? And so it just adds to his story more, and it helps you build out The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe even better. It doesn't detract from the story at all, which is extremely wonderful to see.
Yeah. Gadfly Fiction says Magician's Nephew is a Silmarillion of Narnia. I would say yes, except for the fact that it's a lot more readable than it is.
it's in
a plot.
yeah,
It's like
it's in a narrative. Yeah, it's in a narrative structure. It's not just like an encyclopedia or something. Yeah, Deuteronomy. It's a much easier read for sure.
Yeah. Yes. So out of all of them, that was one of the ones that moved me the most, as well as the Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe with all its magic from childhood.
Absolutely fair. For sure.
I know that you do have to go, so before we wind down, or we are winding down rather, I'm gonna give the floor to you. Give me some final thoughts that you have, anything that you want to add that you haven't already said about the Chronicles of Narnia that you think sum it all up.
Go read the books. Truly, you will enjoy them, even if you only read if you only read The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian. I think you're in good company. I have let Miss Martin know this as well. I am not a huge fan of the final book.
Mm-hmm.
It is not my favorite by a long shot for many reasons. But I think that the story itself is excellent. I do recommend it over any, like, while a lot of the films do it justice, go read the books. They are fantastic. They are well written. And I would say check out C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy as well. That is also a well done story, and it will give you a lot of the escapism that many of us are thirsting for.
Yes. Amen. And we might be doing that for the Fantasy Tavern at a future date. I've personally never read that. It's the only thing I really haven't read from C.S. Lewis, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I like what you said, Lady Gravemaster, because this is something that me, and if you follow Stig on Twitter, you'll see we've been really advocating, quit hurting your soul with this garbage that we're seeing right now, and go backwards. Go back to what you love. Go back to the stories of your childhood. And if you haven't read these books, oh my gosh, what are you waiting for? Read them. And or if you haven't reread them, go ahead and reread them. I started doing that sometime last fall, and I have not regretted it. I found it was like a weight was lifted off of me, because you can't just keep reading or watching things that hurt you. It's like have some fun, read this book. It feels like someone's punching you in the face every 5 minutes, or watch this TV show. And if you can, don't do it digitally. Get the hard books, get the hard novels, get them where you can hold them in your hand, and turn off all your electronics and just go into another world.
Absolutely. And don't buy into this lie that or like this common thought of, I'll just wait for the show, or I'll just wait for the movie. Don't do that. You're cheating yourself out of so much greatness, because I don't know if you've looked around in Hollywood lately, but I mean, to be perfectly honest, the reason that so many people love The Lord of the Rings is because it is perhaps the best adaptation ever of any book series. And there have been tons of books to film and books to television.
Yes.
I would say the only one that might rival it is the 1980s and the 1990s, or I think it was the 80s. There's one from the 80s and one from the 90s of Pride and Prejudice.
Yes, the 1981 and the 1995.
Yes. So those two, I would say, are probably the only adaptations that I am aware of that might even rival Lord of the Rings in adaptation. But there have been so many poorly done adaptations, and so many exceptionally well done inspirations from different book stories, or like different storytelling. Shakespeare's stories, I don't know if you guys realize this, but they have been told and retold and redone and reimagined so many times in so many ways, that you are probably watching a Shakespeare influenced show without even realizing it.
Absolutely, because modern versions of them, or even just straight adaptations. Like, if you haven't seen Kenneth Branagh's version of Henry V, oh my gosh, it is epic. It is so amazing. 1989. Yeah, go back. And I was going to say, Lady Gravemaster, I would add the 1983 adaptation of Jane Eyre with Timothy Dalton.
Yes, that is also an excellent one.
That is
Jane
superb.
Eyre. So the Bronte sisters are not my Jane Eyre is just really depressing for me. And they're like, but it has a happy ending, and it's like, yeah, I guess, but like he was all disfigured and in pain the rest of his life because of what
he got burned.
He had to go. Yeah, because his ex-wife or his now late wife put him through. Like, I don't know. I'm just. Jane Austen.
It was symbolic, though. It was symbolic.
Yes,
so if you think about it being symbolic, it's a happy ending.
Yeah, you're right. The Bronte sisters are a little bit. All three of them. I mean, Anne probably less so than
Emily
the other
Bronte.
two.
Wuthering Heights. That is the most messed up story on the planet.
The Bronte sisters. If you want,
what was going
romance,
on in that house?
I don't know. If you want happy romance, stay away from the Bronte sisters, yo. Like. Yeah. That's not a happy romance. You're gonna get your romance, and you're gonna get a version of a happy ending. But it woo.
Yeah, it'll give you a definite reality. But make a long story short, what we're trying to say, and I was trying to say physical copy. I kept saying hard copy. It's like, no, I'm not talking about a floppy disk. A physical copy of the books, and go outside, get yourself a reading nook. Stig actually showed off his reading nook that he rearranged, and I should probably post on Twitter. I have a reading nook. Everyone should have a reading nook, yes. And I have a little stand next to it where I can have a little pot of tea while I'm doing it as well.
Well, there you go.
So everyone find the joy where you can, and find the joy in all of these things. And of course, in fantasy and in the Fantasy Tavern, this will be a regular series. Where the tentatively planned for the second Tuesday of every month. We will let you know what our next choice is going to be. We just need to iron that out. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Lady G?
Outside of thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure, and this was fun. The Chronicles of Narnia is one of my favorite series. It really is. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the chat. You are beautiful.
Yeah, and I think we can find you on your channel. I know that the link's been in the chat. You have a Thursday night show, I'm correct?
Yes. I have Nostalgic Nirvana, where every Thursday night I just talk about an IP that I love. So it's going to be the year of fantasy pretty much on my channel. So last week we covered the first Mythica it's called it's a series. It's called Mythica, and we covered the first film last week. We're covering Mythica, the Dark Sport this week. So film 1 was Mythica, A Quest for Heroes. I highly recommend it. Kevin Sorbo is in it, and he's in the whole series. It's fantastic. And this week we're going to be covering Mythica, the Dark Sport, which is number 2 in the series. So we're going to be going over all 5 so this will be week 2 out of 5 of the films. And like I always say over there, I will never there's no ranting on that channel. There's nothing that I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, or I don't like it, but you might. I only share what I love on that channel. And I'm hoping that by doing that, it will help you either rediscover something that you forgot you loved, or help you find something that you can love anew.
Precisely. Yeah, Lady T says it well here. Lady Toriel, rather. Oh, she's Lady T. Oh, gosh. You girls are going to confuse me. I'm already confused enough with all the ladies we have around here. All books are adventures to explore. Yes. And I love that about your channel, and I think that's why people like your channel. Also, on Saturday, we are going to be continuing with our Lord of the Rings book discussion, and it is going to be what do you call it? It's going to be the Return of the King, because we did finish the 2 Towers. So we are going to be going into the 3rd book. We're going to be going into the 3rd book this Saturday. So thank you everyone to being here. I do appreciate it. Thank you, John. I know you said you wish you'd logged on earlier. I'm just happy you're here. Welcome, Miss Smart Muses. If you all have not already liked, shared, and subscribed, please do so. Lady Toriel, always lovely to see you. We have Keck. We have Jacob Ironsides. We had Gadfly Fiction. Lethal Lightning. Let me see if I can get it. I think I got most everyone. If I did forget you, I sincerely apologize. And my mods, Soul Assassin, my mods did a great job tonight. Thank you for getting rid of those pesky little aliens from Russia. Have a good evening, everybody. Have a good evening, and be certain to read what you love.